just like, right on.
This is
like,
cool.
make sure that these people know this.
Wait,
but
this was a secular university?
secular university.
Wow.
And he was pointing out that we do not have a democracy. But anyways, so one of the things I kind of want to dispel, like a misnomer, is that if we think of our culture and our style of government as a democracy, like that's our self-government, oftentimes what people associate that with is just this kind of blanket, like, oh, we all just get into a room and we all get to have a say in something, and it's just like 51% of the vote. That's what we make our decisions on. And like, I think a lot of people think like that's how our system works.
No.
Which it doesn't.
Praise God it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, it's just as you were saying that, it reminded me of a Benjamin Franklin quote when he's talking about, somebody asked him, like, are we getting a democracy? And I think his response was something like, well, a democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner. And 51% wins, right? That's how democracy, and that's how our founders understood.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
That's perfect. But so then the other thing is just like, in a general sense, the like Athenian form of democracy, that's not even what it was.
Yeah, you were telling me about that before the show.
Yeah, and so it's not mob rule. So within the Athenian system, they had this thing called the ecclesia, which is the general assembly. That's what we think of as the democracy. Like, they're the democratic body that votes on laws.
Interesting.
Interesting enough, same word that Jesus used to describe his
the
church.
Yeah. I was about to say that. That's really cool.
Yep. But so that's a whole nother, we could do a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, we could.
But so one of the things like in the system is there was a position called the archon, which was elected by the ecclesia, and they were actually the people who applied the laws and led an army.
So kind of like the executive branch.
It's very, like, has an executive kind of flavor to it. There's a famous one named Solon. He did all these kind of Athenian reforms.
Yes.
But these are the people who are actually expected to like put the laws in practice and like apply them in the public setting. The other thing that they did is they had this group called the Boule, which I told that to Mara one time, and she just kept saying the word. She's like, Boule, Boule. And I was like, I'm glad you're getting entertainment out of this.
I think that's a cool word.
Yeah.
I might use that the rest of the day, just Boule.
Boule, yeah. But so that was a group of 500 citizens, Athenian citizens that were selected by lot, and they prepared the laws that were going to be discussed.
Wow, okay.
So they would actually present those laws to the ecclesia, and they would say, basically, this is what's on the docket for the day. So it wasn't just a free-for-all, like everyone just gets to shout about, like, I want more free cheese. Like, there were people who were designated, to present these laws, and I'm sure lobbied to,
absolutely,
at dinner parties and et cetera,
paid off.
Yeah. So, and then you have the ecclesia. They're the ones that debate laws and pass the laws, and they make decisions about war. Are we going to go to war or not?
Now, is the ecclesia, is that like the entire citizen populace?
Entire citizen
Yes,
populace.
I said it on purpose. 'Cause, I didn't want you to set me up again.
Yeah, not the actual populace itself, which is pretty fascinating. So just in general, there are like qualifications for, as an Athenian, like that you had to meet to be a citizen. So one, you had to be a male. One, you had to be sort of like the head of your household. So like you're either the father
like the
or you're like the independent or something like that. So like if you were a son who was unmarried and lived in your like father's household, you don't technically qualify as a citizen who can vote in the ecclesia.
Gotcha. Okay.
Same thing, slaves, servants, these people, they're not involved in that.
Right.
It's another thing that's fascinating because it's very different from our kind of modern ideas of even just citizenship. But then I think there are a lot of people in our country who have this idea that just kind of like, we're just like the Greeks, where everybody just kind of voted and everyone who lived there. And it's like, no, they had people who they specifically were like, you don't count. Yeah. You don't get to vote.
No, right. Well, and fun fact, not that it's that fun, until I think the 1820s or 30s in America, only property owning males were allowed
Yeah.
to vote. So we kind of had that kind of
Similar system.
for a little while, but that
Right.
changed.
And I mean, up until, the 20th century, women were not allowed to
Right,
vote. Up
right.
until the civil rights movement, people, of color didn't have the same access to voter registration.
Right. And just a lot of messed up stuff in our
Yeah.
history, which, and, on the podcast, we don't want to shy away from the bad things, but we definitely want to make sure we hold up what was actually good. And so, yeah.
For sure. So that's basically Athens. Sparta, which is the other kind of one that a lot of people think about. They're an oligarchy, which is
Not even close to a democracy.
not even close. It's not even. It has an element of self-government, which
Yeah.
is fascinating.
Okay.
Because they function as like a hereditary dual monarchy. Sorry, I can't speak.
There you go.
So kind of interesting. The funny thing about the movie 300.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, so there's King Leonidas
Right.
leads the 300.
Familiar with
well,
him.
There's actually another king
Okay.
in Sparta in like actual history. There's two kings, not
Oh,
one.
I got you.
Leonidas is one of the kings, which is just a little fun fact.
Okay.
Where movies get things wrong, but
Hollywood.
yeah. So then there's a group called the E4s. There was 5 of them who are kind of like these military advisors to the kings.
Kind of like the top brass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Generals basically is
Yeah,
what they
yeah.
are. Then you have this thing called the Gerousia, which is 28 selected officials plus the 2 kings. So they are basically like a senate. They're the kind of senatorial body that's selected by this group called the Apella, which is the General Assembly of Spartan males, which is similar to the Ecclesia. They kind of discuss things, vote on things.
Wow. I mean,
So Sparta
Yeah.
has a element of self-government, again, in the context that it's the male military
right.
soldiers
in that
who
context,
are the ones
right.
who kind of participate in
But
their
that's even
governmental system.
like you've taught me a lot I didn't know at all. Like this is amazing. I didn't
yes,
know.
you're letting me nerd out, Joel.
I should let you do it more often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know about was it boule?
The boule.
I didn't know about that.
Yep.
I didn't know about the Apella here that they like with Sparta. They almost have a republic as opposed to democracy.
Yeah.
Like that is almost a republic there.
Yeah, and it's, obviously there's a hierarchy, kind of element to it.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, in Sparta, as it pertains to the ladies, women like could be considered citizens in Sparta. So you would have like adult males and females who were like the actual Spartans who like, so to be a Spartan citizen, male citizen, you have to go through like this whole military training as a youth, and if you become one, then you're a Spartiate, and then like their wives were technically considered citizens as well.
Okay.
Which is interesting because
That is
Athens
interesting.
that doesn't have that element, although they weren't a part of the Apella. So it's like a whole thing.
Okay.
That's another deep dive. Anyways,
It's almost like they were flirting with the idea, but just didn't quite get there.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
gotcha.
So then that last kind of ancient example that like I was going to bring up was the Roman Republic. So, kind of has some oligarchy flavor into it as well.
Right.
And similar to America's that we have this republic. So again, it's kind of, there's this related sort of, kinship of like, oh, so that's self-government is you have this representative republic, only in the Roman context,
Right.
power and governance is based on the assumption that rights and power and stuff like that is granted by the ruling elite.
Oh, gosh. It's exact opposite of what we talked about in our episodes on government.
Yeah.
Right.
So then you have sort of the regular people, or what they would call the plebeians. They have to fight for representation in government.
Right.
So whereas you would have in America, it's sort of like this idea that like, one of our founding beliefs is that like you have a right to representation in government. Like it's your fundamental right as like a human. They had to fight for it, and they actually have to basically rebel against the Senate on multiple occasions until they form different bodies. One of them is the Consulum Plebis. which is not allows the plebeians to have like a body where they meet and discuss things, and they don't really have that much power, but they can just at least talk about how mad they are at the Senate.
It's like a one of those. It's a valve in like a steam engine.
Yes, exactly.
Let all the hot air out.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So the other one they have is the office of the tribune. The tribune has this thing called veto power, where they act as a representative for the plebeians. And what they do is they stand like in the doorway of the Roman Senate. And if they hear something that they think is like really not good for the general public, they'll yell out veto.
Oh, wow.
And it's supposed to be this power of like, no, that law cannot be passed because it's too against. Man. And which is kind of cool. And that's where we get some of our ideas of like the enumeration of powers and things like that come from that. Now, people like Julius Caesar come along and they abuse this tribune power.
Of course.
And it becomes a part of what the emperor ends up getting is the tribune. I'm not going to even try to say that word. The tribune power. I was going to be real fancy and say the long version. And I was like, no.
I'm not going to even try either. Thanks.
But so that's one thing the emperor gets is the tribune power. So he can veto laws.
Okay.
That's what basically makes him emperor because he can now has the right to say no to anything he wants.
Which that kind of idea of veto, that's where our founders got that term. And they put that in the executive to help balance out, which we're not going to get into right now, the different branches of our government, and that's for another podcast to break all that down. But that is interesting that some of these ideas, they seem to have carried over into our own government. But I mean, I've read things from the founding fathers that they're like, no, we are not trying to recreate Rome. We're not trying to recreate Greece. Greece was a nightmare. Rome, they kept trampling on each other's rights.
Yeah,
we'll use some of the terms, we'll use some of the concepts, but we're gonna definitely change a lot of them.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the reason why, like, I thought it was worth discussing some of these things and kind of breaking down some of the systems of how those old styles worked, specifically as they relate to self-government. Because again, you see the elements. You see the concepts, you see how people might be confused and might think that that's what we do. Right. When in reality, it's not.
No, not